Good morning, good afternoon, or good night, and welcome to Command Power, the show in which we discuss all things Magic the Gathering with a focus on Commander. And today I want to do a little bit of an opinion piece about why I think you shouldn't be using EDHREC as much as you probably are, which may be a little bit controversial, but do bear with me because I think there's a good point that I'm trying to make. Now, before anything else, let me just say as a quick disclaimer that I absolutely love EDHREC. It's a great website. It has so many good tools and assets, and it's going to help you build better decks, particularly if you are a new player. It's invaluable and it can save you a ton of time, and as a content creator who has to pump out a lot of deck lists very fast, sometimes I do find myself using it a bit for those kind of decks in particular. Not only that, but I think the team behind EDHREC seem like very nice people. I certainly love the EDHREC podcast as well, which is super fun, and they're such great hosts. So yeah, nothing against the website or the people behind it whatsoever, but I have found certain things to be true lately, and those are the things that I'm going to be talking about in this video. So to start off, let me give you a brief summary of where I have been lately in my deck building. So I've been playing Magic for quite a while, and I've been playing Commander I think for at least 10 years at this point, so I've seen and played with all sorts of different decks. There's very few ideas and commanders that really get me super excited these days because most commanders still fit into certain kind of molds, and it's very hard to find something that is absolutely unique. A few years ago I discovered EDHREC, and what I've been finding myself doing more and more lately is that when I build decks, I'll just go to EDHREC first, look through all the absolutely must-have cards. I basically include anything from their high synergy list and their top cards list, and sometimes even from their new cards list. And then after I've done that, I'll scroll down through the different categories and just add all sorts of cards that I see there that I find interesting. But I do use it as like a jumping board to start off a deck and get it like 75% complete, and then add the rest of the cards from things that I own or I collect. Now lately when I've been playing Commander, I've been finding that I'm a little bit dissatisfied with the way games have been playing out, and particularly with the way my decks have been doing. I haven't really been enjoying myself that much, and I was wondering why that was. And I think a lot of it has come down to using EDHREC, or at least using EDHREC too much or in the wrong way. Now I'm guessing this deck building process sounds quite familiar to a lot of you who have maybe been playing Commander for a while, but here are the reasons why I think that using EDHREC too much or kind of leaning on it too heavily makes for a worse enjoyment of the game. And the first reason is it makes all decks very optimized and similar. So if you run through the top cards on each deck, it's basically going to recommend the same things over and over, and that is kind of by design because the website is an aggregator. That means that the more decks that people build with a certain commander, the more data it is working with. The problem is it's become such a big website that it's kind of a self-looping kind of prophecy. The more people that use EDHREC, the more the cards that are already being recommended are going to keep being pushed to the top, thus kind of reinforcing them, making it very hard for different recommendations to pop up. That is good. It does mean that you're eventually going to get the most popular cards on there somewhat, but then it also does mean that every deck is going to play out very similarly. If every deck is having the same removal recommended and the same ramp spells recommended, then you're going to end up with a lot of similar decks. I certainly find that when I'm playing against other people's decks, and it does remove some of the enjoyment from seeing all these cool unique cards. The second point that I'm going to make is kind of related to the first, and the point is that using EDHREC too much decentivizes you from running suboptimal or pet cards. Now for me, this is something that I care about more than most people, I'm guessing because I just really don't want to have the experience of Commander turning basically into some kind of constructed format where most decks have these specific staples that you absolutely have to run, and you can't just play anything fun or different or maybe not as good. The initial origins of the Commander format were always as a way to play all these janky, expensive spells that couldn't really see play in competitive 1v1 Magic, and I feel that that's being lost somewhat the more we rely on EDHREC. Decks are more and more optimized these days, which is a good thing for the most part, but it does also mean that you see less unique and fun things that just throw you for a loop or make you ask, what does that card do again? The third reason I think you have to be a little bit careful with EDHREC is that you do occasionally get some bad recommendations from it. You get cards that maybe don't fit in the strategy but seem like they would. And then of course, because of the compounding nature of the site, once more and more people start adding them to decks, they get pushed further and further to the top. They're in a higher percentage of decks, even though maybe they're straight up numbers. An example of a card that doesn't work very well in a certain deck is something like Minthara and Teleportation Circle. So because Minthara triggers at the beginning of your end step and it has an intervening if clause, it's not going to trigger at all unless something left the battlefield before the end step started, which means that Teleportation Circle isn't going to help at all with your commander, and yet it's still recommended very highly in EDHREC for that commander. A similar example is something like Compost in Daryl, because it's run in over 40% of decks and it's recommended as the #1 enchantment for that deck, whereas in fact it doesn't really work with your commander at all. The black tokens going to the graveyard are not going to draw you cards. It might still draw you cards in other ways, seeing as people do run black a lot, but it doesn't actually work with what your commander is specifically doing, so it's weird that it's got such a high score. Finally, finally, and this is the most important point, although it's also the most subjective one, for me, what I've noticed recently is I've had the most fun deck building and playing decks when I've just gone back to my old way of doing things, where I'd look through my collection first, take out cards that drew my attention, throw them in a deck even if they didn't necessarily fit that well together, and then tune it after that. I've got an amazing Teysa Envoy of Ghost decks that I made a couple of weeks ago, and I've just been playing it so much because I really enjoy it, even though the commander is complete jank, and a lot of the cards in there are just cards I happen to have from my old Gatecrash days. However, it's got me back into building for fun and just playing cards that I enjoy seeing, rather than just playing things that are always super optimized and the best in the slot. So yeah, to sum up my points in this video, I think that EDHREC is a great tool, but it does depend on how you use it. If you've found yourself feeling a little bit bored lately, or like your decks are too streamlined and always do the same thing and you kind of get tired of them very quickly, it might be because you're relying too much on EDHREC to help you build those decks. What I would recommend is the exact opposite of what I'd been doing up until recently. Build 75% of your deck first through cards in your collection or cards that you find doing searches in something like Scryfall, and then when you've only got a few slots left, go over EDHREC, double check if you've missed something really important, but for the most part leave your deck as it was and enjoy the fun experience of having a slightly suboptimal deck that really gets you back into deck building. Anyway, those are my thoughts on this and my personal experience lately. Let me know what you think in the comment section below and whether you agree or disagree with me. I read all comments and respond to all of them too, and until next time, take care.